Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today we're going to be talking about some Irish classics. Apologies for the lighting. I do think that my bedroom at my mother's house is possibly the darkest place on earth. If you weren't aware, the Irish Readathon is here, which is a month that myself and my friend Aoife, who is my co-host of the Readathon, we dedicate this to reading more Irish books than you normally would. All of the information will be linked down below in the description if you want to find out more. But today I thought I would recommend to you some classics, because I know a lot of people that participate in the Readathon love kind of the canon of Irish literature. This is definitely not going to be like an extensive, exhaustive list, but it's going to be a selection. And I'm going to start with a book that many of you have probably already read, and that is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So this is a book kind of about the scandal and debauchery of the Victorian era, and it is about a man named Dorian Gray who makes this kind of like deal with the devil, where there is a portrait of him in his attic that ages instead of him, and he becomes this extremely beautiful but also corrupt man, and this secret kind of sends him down this path of cruelty. And if you are someone that thinks you don't like reading classics, I would really recommend this one. This was the first classic that I ever kind of read for my own reading for pleasure, not for like any sort of academic educational reason. If you think classic books are really sort of difficult to get into, I would definitely say this is more on the kind of accessible scale, and this is definitely one of my favourite classics of all time. Oscar Wilde has also written a lot of other stuff, so this is Lord Arthur Saville's Crime, which you can find in this Penguin Little Black Classics edition. But there's also, for example, The Importance of Being Earnest, and I would really recommend checking out his short stories for children as well. They're very interesting. Another that you may have already heard of, or indeed already read, is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I don't think a lot of people know that this is by an Irish author, but you can actually go and visit Bram Stoker's house in Dublin. So this is a horror vampire novel, and it's one of those books that I think has been kind of absorbed into public consciousness, but a lot of people don't actually really know the details of the story. It's really an exploration and an illumination of Victorian sexuality that is told in an epistolary way, so that means that it is told through letters. But another book I want to highlight, as of course a lot of you may have already read this one, is Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. This is another Irish vampire book, which is a lot more gay. It's much shorter and, in fact, I think a lot better than Dracula. So big recommendation for that one. Next, I'd like to recommend Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. So this was originally published in 1726, and it is a parody, it's a piss take of the kind of travel expedition voyage novel. So we're following Gulliver when he is shipwrecked, and he goes through a number of very like strange, odd experiences as he interacts with different tribes. Please don't judge this book based off the really shit film with Jack Black in it. Jonathan Swift has written some other stuff as well, including A Modest Proposal, which is another one of the Penguin Little Black Classics, and this is a satirical, political essay about how to resolve the famine in Ireland. Next is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. This was published originally between 1914 and 1915. It's a bildungsroman, so it's a kind of coming of age novel, but it also has a lot to do with the arts. It's about a quest for identity and understanding. We're following one main character, Stephen Daedalus, who is kind of figuring out who he is, both in like kind of his own personal life, but in the wider landscape of Ireland in relation to, you know, religion, class, art. You may also want to pick up something else by James Joyce. So Dubliners is a collection of 15 short stories. Finnegan's Wake, which I've not read, and Ulysses, which I will never read. James Joyce's writing is a very kind of stream of consciousness style. It's not something that I think is necessarily for me, but I think I definitely value having read some of his work in terms of contextualizing the Irish literary canon. And so many people like love his writing. So if you think that kind of stream of consciousness style of writing is for you, then I would definitely recommend picking up some of his books. I'd also like to recommend Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. So Beckett has written a number of things, but Waiting for Godot is the thing I know the most well. I studied it at university and I loved it. It's really weird. It's about these like two guys that just show up at this place and they say that they're waiting for Godot, but you don't really know what Godot is or who Godot is, and it's just kind of like the interaction between these two guys, and it's like very weird but so funny. And what I really loved about reading this play is that the stage directions are really funny. Like there's lots of gags in the stage directions, and I think it's definitely worth reading, even so you can just get the jokes in other pieces of like writing or like TV, film, etc. that reference Waiting for Godot. Like, it's a joke that crops up quite a lot, and it's a really, really fun play. Speaking of plays, I'm gonna whiz through these recommendations really quickly because I did also speak about them in my recommending short Irish books video. But Dancing at Lunasa by Brian Friel. Brian Friel has a lot of other plays, including Translations, which is one that I'm yet to read but would really like to. Sive by John B. Keane, which debuted in 1959, and it is about a young girl who's being pressured to get married to a much older man, and it's about poverty and religion in Ireland. J.M. Singh is a playwright who is probably most well known for The Playboy of the Western World, which was a play that was met with a lot of controversy when it was first performed, as it was considered to be really stereotyping Irish people. This bind-up has a collection of 6 of his plays, so The Playboy of the Western World and Riders to the Sea, The Shadow of the Glen, The Tinker's Wedding, The Well of the Saints, and Deirdre of Sorrows. J.M. Singh was part of the Anglo-Irish literary revival, which was this real moment in the history of Irish writing where Irish writing was really being uplifted and celebrated, and J.M. Singh's contemporaries were the likes of Lady Gregory and W.B. Yeats. And of course, I'm also going to recommend to you W.B. Yeats, William Butler Yeats. So he's written numerous plays, but I actually think his poetry is much stronger than his plays. This is a bind-up of a lot of his writing. A lot of his work takes inspiration from Irish mythology and ancient history as well, which is something that I really love. And even though these poems were written quite some time ago, it's really interesting to see the relevance that they still have in contemporary society. Dreadfully, I realise there hasn't been many women on this list. That's not to say women weren't writing at the time of these male contemporaries. You know, I mentioned Lady Gregory, there's also Elizabeth Bowen. That's just kind of an area of my experience with the Irish literary canon that I've kind of neglected, and I'm kind of embarrassed about that because so much of the contemporary books I read are by Irish women. Like, some of my favourite books of all time are modern books by Irish women. But one book that I did want to recommend to you, which is a kind of, I guess, a modern classic because it was published in 1960, is The Country Girls by Edna O'Brien. Edna O'Brien is still writing today, but I think this is probably one of her most famous works. It's set in the early 1960s, and it follows 2 girls who are friends who come from a very rural Irish village, and it follows them on the verge of womanhood and experiencing a lot of things that come with that for the first time. They also move to Dublin, so they've gone through this transitional change between, you know, being in the countryside to being in a bigger city, and I think that's a theme that still comes up a lot in contemporary Irish writing from women. So this book really feels like a precursor to a lot of the books that I absolutely love. This is the first book, but I think there are 4 books that follow these 2 characters, and I've read the second one, Girl with Green Eyes, but I haven't read the next 2, so Girls in Their Married Bliss and The Light of Evening. So yeah, shamefully lacking in female recommendations in this video, but at least there's one, I guess. They're all the recommendations I have for you today, but of course there are so many other Irish classics that are out there, so many that I am yet to read. So if you have any recommendations for me, do leave them down below in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of these books, and let me know what you are most excited to read for the Irish Readathon this year. If you are looking for more recommendations for the Readathon, I will leave the playlist linked down below, which has a bunch of videos recommending books for the Readathon. That is it from me today. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will speak to you in my next video.